with other schools often, or what is generally taught about subjects, because it is important that we see the practical purpose of what we learn in yoga. And very often, theories and philosophies in yoga are taught on a very superficial level, because the teacher, the person who is teaching, discussing the subject, knows the subject not from own experience, but from reading a book or having heard it from another teacher, but not having it applied on his own practical situation in life. And this is crucial to bring yoga beyond the superficial level or the theoretical level. We have to start applying it in our daily lives, because yoga is the science of life. Now, often when nonviolence is explained, it is explained as don't kill your neighbor, don't kill another human being. And that's it. Because if you kill somebody, you are violent. So don't kill anybody. In the meantime, we commit hundreds of acts of violence throughout every single day. But you think you are non-violent because you never kill your neighbor. It doesn't work like that. We have many violent thoughts. Many. In just one single day, in 1 hour, we can already catch ourselves having violent thoughts. There are many ideas and thoughts that we have throughout the day that we actually do not consider to be violent. The way we react, for example, to people that we come across, and a big city is in that sense very challenging, but this is going to be your homework also, is to consciously observe how people coming close to you, or even when you just simply look at people just at their expression only, how violent thoughts arise in you. Feelings or sense of aggression or ugly thoughts. That is all form of violence. To make life more harmonious, the principle of nonviolence is your most important tool. We have to start working on nonviolence first, for everything else. It is a very elaborate subject. So we discuss only one subject per class, instead of what is customary is to discuss all the 5 yamas in just one class. And I hope that you read the files at home also, and that you come to class with questions about those subjects. Because if you have questions, that means that you think about, for example, the subject of nonviolence, how that fits into your daily life. And based upon that, you can come to very interesting discussions. How do you approach nonviolence? First of all, as I just suggested, as a kind of homework, you start observing yourself, how you react to situations, how often you have violent, if not thoughts, reactions, energies, bursts of energy. But on a practical level, if you find it very difficult to place this into your life, on a practical level, start applying nonviolence in your yoga practice. That is the start. I've mentioned it this morning already. When you practice, do not push yourself too far. Engagement is important, so you have to engage in each pose to a certain extent that you feel intensity. you have felt, especially with Uttita Parsvakonasana, that an exercise can be very deeply intense if you do it correctly, if you make alignment adjustments. Non-violence means that the moment that you start to feel pain, muscles start shaking, that you have to stop doing the exercise, because those are indications of violence. You are being violent to yourself. So what we do in yoga, with everything that we learn, first we start with ourselves. We start applying it first to ourselves. And when we more and more understand it, with time passing by, we more and more understand it, we can then start more and more applying it to our environment. And start influencing our environment also. Because if you have a non-violent attitude, people around you become milder and softer too. That is a natural law. He who lives by the sword, dies by the sword. That is an expression. I think every language has this kind of expression. You reap what you sow. If you have a violent nature, a violent mind, you will attract people onto your path who are violent too. If you understand this a little bit, you understand also a little bit the law of karma. You can never blame other people for what is happening to you. Because it is you in the first place who attract with your energy the energies that are coming your way. This is also for later, but this is how it works. How do you handle all this? How do you deal with this? How do you apply this in your life? The most important step you have to take is that you start paying attention. You can call it mindfulness. Yoga practice leads to mindfulness, naturally. But you have to start becoming aware of what you do. Stop doing things unconsciously, not knowingly, or just as a habit or a tendency. We have to break all these kind of things. So we start observing. And when we have a thought of violence, for example, if you have a thought of violence to yourself when you are practicing doing something, human beings are, most of the times, they are their own worst enemy. Have you realized this, maybe, in your life? We don't need other people to hurt us, to tackle us and throw us down to the floor. We very often do that ourselves, mentally. But the first thing we have to do is apply non-violence to ourselves. How do we handle ourselves? We have to stop breaking ourselves down with every imperfection. We have to first become our own best friend. And one of the issues that you need for that is important for that, is to start becoming non-violent also to yourself, not only to other people. There is a way to handle, if you have a violence thought, to handle violence. If that is directed to yourself, counter the violent thought with compassion, understanding, flexibility. Stop being perfect, because perfectionism hurts you. It kills you in the end. If you have violent thoughts to other people, and you all have that, I have them too. You walk in the street and somebody behaves strangely or bumps into you or whatever. Pay attention to how many times you have some violent thoughts, or in your mind you have some ugly thoughts. When that happens, it always happens unconsciously, subconsciously, but from today we are going to be aware of this. And sometimes not, sometimes we do, but anyway, from today we are going to start becoming aware of this. When you catch yourself having such a thought, negative thought, violent thought, you look again at that person that caused that reaction in you. And you try to find a good point. Can you do that? You counter violence with compassion, with understanding, with insight. We are all human beings. We are all spirits. We are all the same. We are all family. Literally, we are all family. If you go back through history, we all come from the same source. We are brothers and sisters. So, you are not doing this in the beginning. Yoga, I have to tell you, is a very selfish practice. You are being very selfish. But it is a good kind of selfish, because you need to create time for yourself and spend energy on yourself to grow, to develop, to study, to practice. The yoga, you have to apply in the beginning to yourself. And that compassion that you show to another person, because you first, initially you had an ugly thought, that is actually in the beginning, that is for yourself. To maintain harmony, to avoid all those disturbances that we are usually subject to. Because this is the whole point. When you have a violent thought, you create a breach in your energy circulation. Apart from all the other implications, this morning I explained how energy affects other people. So if you have a negative thought, a violent thought, people around you feel that too. Most people don't feel that consciously, but the reaction will be, they have another ugly thought about you in return. You radiate that ugly thought, and people, most of the times not consciously, unless you have practiced something like this and have increased your awareness, most of the times not consciously, but that is how people interact with each other. An ugly thought from your side invites other ugly thoughts from your surroundings. But the best way, if you find conflict in your life, if you find that day by day you are struggling and people are always against you, you have to start looking at yourself. Because there is a disharmony, and you have to try to turn that disharmony into harmony. And one of the things, one of your most important tools to do that, is to start creating harmony. Now maybe you think I'm talking gibberish, but a very practical example is, I had a Korean partner. I actually even got married for 3 months. After 10 years of living together. And she was a champion in disharmony. And it took a long time for me to understand. All the people around her, she has conflict with. And out of love, I went along with her, blaming those other people. But I was also part of that disharmony and almost daily conflict, just out of the blue, for nothing. When I started working here, my wife quit her job. She worked in her brother's office, where also with everybody she had conflict, including with her brother and all the workers. And so I told her, why don't you manage my yoga school? And she started managing my yoga school, and everything went down the drain. Because everybody she's dealing with, she creates disharmony, and as a result, with everybody, we started having conflicts. And the management here wanted to get rid of us. So when it started to become clear to me, I told her, you stay home. Don't interfere anymore. I will take care of this. And I had to do a lot of effort. First I had to get all the important people here together, the management, sales, marketing, all the leaders, and we had a very long talk. They slowly started to turn around a little bit. It took a long time to actually restore a relationship again. How? By harmony. I am a champion of harmony. My wife was the opposite. It took a long time for me to understand, but it made me a specialist, in fact. Because the moment that I shut my wife out and I started taking care of all those people face to face without interference, everything became very nice and smooth and harmonious. You understand this? So I started explaining this issue by saying, if you find yourself having conflicts in your life, everything being a struggle, having the feeling that everybody is against you, you have to start with yourself. Look at yourself first. There is a reason for those struggles. There is a reason for those people being obstinate to you. And it's most likely that there is one way or another, there is a form of violence in your attitude or in the way you communicate that makes those people react like that. Can you understand this a little bit? Non-violence is crucial to build for yourself a life without conflict, with a road going upwards in sense of development. You will see, if you can manage, things start to become easy in life. The principle of sukha, like sitting like this, eventually will trickle through to all aspects of your life. Not only when you sit like this, but also when you do Uttita Parsvakonasana, the heavy exercise we did today, also in all the other things you are dealing with in your life. Because yoga is not just an exercise that stands on its own. Everything you do will eventually be integrated into your life. The way you approach doing the physical exercises will change the way how you do other things in your life. You will see. It will transform you as a person, mentally, physically also, but that is just a side effect. You will start functioning totally differently as a result. To grow awareness, to grow mindfulness, how do you do that? Do you have an idea? To become aware of your violent thoughts, for example, how do you do that? Simply by being quiet. I use the word simply, but for many people that is very difficult. Because when it is quiet, we put some earplugs in our ear and we play our favorite music. Or we turn on the TV because it is so quiet at home. There's nothing on the TV, but anyway, it distracts a little bit, keeps you busy. Start doing those things consciously and try to create more and more silence. Silence is the recipe for mindfulness, for awareness. Do you have any questions about the issue of non-violence?
I have like kind of a basic question. Because like in I guess in my background, like if somebody threatens your life, like physically or something like that, you're allowed to respond in kind. But so, like, what if somebody assaults you? Like, how do
somebody assaults you?
Right. So I mean,
then the warrior in you comes up.
So it's like self-defense is
yes, of
acceptable.
course. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I understand the question. As a non-violent person, as a non-violent yogi, you don't say, "Okay, here, stab me. I'm non-violent, so I won't. You can do what you want." You don't do that, of course. When somebody threatens your life, you have to save your life. What is important is that you don't lose sight of proportionality. If somebody punches you, you try to avoid another punch, and if that person is totally out of his mind, so aggressive that you cannot just avoid it, maybe you will have to punch back. That is proportional. But if you shoot that person, while he only punched you, then you go too far. And you create a lot of karma for yourself. And we don't have the principle of turning the other cheek. Turning the other cheek. When people hit you, you don't turn the other cheek and say, hey, do it again. That is stupid. To kill that person, that is stupid too. But it's even more stupid to say, hey, nice, do it again. So the approach is sensible, and a yogi, as a result of your development, you will see, you become very sharp, very agile. That is the characteristic of people who practice real yoga. You become very mentally sharp. You use that sharpness, agility, to understand the essence of situations. Even better, to avoid situations that get you in trouble. Yeah.
What about in situations of like non-physical violence? If someone like spouts a verbal attack at you, like isn't it easiest to just turn the other cheek?
Maybe to a certain point, yes, but that can invite more abuse. Often that results in more abuse because you seem to be an easy victim.
So how do you stop the cycle?
First of all, most important is that you preserve your dignity. So self-respect and dignity you lose the moment that you lose your control. So do not get angry, do not become emotional, because always when we do that, we regret later. We try, first of all, to handle the situation sensibly. In case of that kind of abuse that you are mentioning there, maybe that means that you have to take that person separate, apart, and just have a talk with that person, eye to eye, without other people being in the surroundings. And if that doesn't work, you have to just create a situation where you are not being confronted with that person anymore. That can go many ways. If you work, if it is in a work environment, for example, and if that abuse is very obvious, maybe you have to talk with your manager. But that is very complex. I can't give you instant solution because the manager may be on the hand of the other person, and etc. etc. So you have to really go with the situation of that moment and do the sensible thing to do. Yeah.
You mentioned haste as a form of violence.
Yes, very much.
And I thought that was really interesting. So I was wondering if there are some other examples you could give, kind of like haste that you wouldn't normally think of.
You come to the yoga class, okay? We start at 9:45. When you're late, what happens? Adrenaline is pumping in you, at least if you have a little bit of conscience. You look at the clock and, oh God, I'm late. So what happens with your harmony? Totally destroyed. And you come into the yoga class, everybody is in peace, and you are totally disrupted. It's very difficult to come down from that disruption. If you don't care, then you violate the principle of truthfulness, because coming late is a lie, and you're stealing other people's time as well. Somebody is waiting there for you. And in a case of a yoga class, let's take that as a very practical example. You disturb 29 people who come late. But again, we try to apply this to ourselves in the first place. So look at what happens. You leave home late, so you start to run to the bus stop. Then you have to transfer to the subway, and you run from the bus to the subway, and you end up here, and you're totally sweating and totally messed up, actually, mentally. But look at the opposite picture. You wake up in time, you have plenty of time, you can take a shower, you have time for a nice cup of tea or a little bit of small breakfast or something. And you have plenty of time, so you just stroll to the subway, and you take the subway, and you read the newspaper, or you read the handout, of course, you should. You get out of the subway, and you have another little walk to come here, and hey, wow, 10 minutes left, oh, I have to go to the toilet, let's go. And you're calm, and you're totally prepared to start a yoga class. That is totally the opposite. I'm never late. Never ever I'm late. Because of this. It hurts me. If I'm late, I'm totally, because I'm very sensitive, because I'm on this path already for so many years, I'm totally disrupted. I hate coming late. That's why I mentioned it. Just try to be aware of how it is affecting you. Many people, especially those who are habitually late, they have no idea how much nicer their life could be, how much nicer their trip to their destination could be, if they would just wake up in time and leave in time. That is a difference of day and night, really. You have to try it out. In respect to the class, just on a practical level, try, especially in the morning, to be in time, because the most important issues are discussed in the morning, at the start of the class. Usually. Like this morning also, more than an hour, I have explained many crucial things actually for your understanding of yoga. If you're late, you miss that. Now you will see, we are talking here about nonviolence as being something that you have to imply on yourself. Is that the right word? Imply? Yeah. Something that you have to enforce on yourself. But it works actually both ways. Because as a result of your yoga practice, as a result of your increase in harmony, you will actually automatically have a tendency to be less violent to yourself, to your environment. Why are we discussing it then? We can just practice and let all those things occur naturally. We are discussing it because that makes the difference between Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga. Because if we discuss it, you are consciously aware of all these issues, and that increases your development fourfold. Theoretically, they say, enlightenment is reached with Hatha Yoga in 12 years' time, with Raja Yoga in 3 years' time. That is symbolical, that is theoretical. You can ask what is enlightenment. I'm not going to go into that today. But it is an indication of the difference. Raja Yoga is the whole science of yoga. And by discussing the Hatha Yoga Pratipika and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, you become very much aware of the transformations that are occurring as a result of your practice. And that gives you a big advantage. I know that because when I started practicing yoga, I started practicing yoga from a book. I told you on the open day a little bit my very first impression of yoga by just on a basketball court practicing some exercises with a judo champion. I have practiced yoga without really studying or having a teacher making me aware for many years. And that has resulted in many developments that have actually they have made me very weak. Not weak, vulnerable. Because all those transformations are taking place, you start to doubt, hey, what is happening with me? Is this right? I'm more sensitive. Is that the purpose of yoga? But when you know how everything works, if you know how it works, you also know how to deal with the weaker spots or the insecurities or the doubts that might arise. I will tell you more about this later. I will give you some titles of some very interesting books also that will help you deal with all that. I told you this morning that to be on the path of a yogi, a real yogi, you have to be courageous. And that is no joke. Because you will expose yourself, and there will be doubt about developments that are occurring, and all this is described in certain books. Every person on the spiritual path goes through this process, and if you know that, a big burden will fall off your shoulder. All the insecurities will disappear, and you will start looking at it in a constructive way. Well, if it is normal, then okay, then what am I supposed to do with this? This is called the diseases of the disciple. And if you read advanced books on esoteric books, you will come across this issue, and it is of enormous help. And I have incorporated all that in my teachings also, so that in the 5 months that we are here, you will build a very solid foundation that will prevent you from having to struggle on the spiritual path for many years, as I have done myself. But that, for me, that's a very important issue to incorporate in the teachings, and we will come back to it many times. Yeah? This is not just a superficial exercise or just a study, or this is transforming lives. It really is. That has many good implications, but if you do not have the right guidance, it will lead to doubt as well and suffering. But we will come back to that. There are 3 levels of violence: in words, in thoughts, in words, and in deeds. This is an indication that, if you kill somebody or if you punch somebody, surely that is physical violence. That is an act. But there's violence on a subtle level. I indicated that just before, that you have a lot of violent thoughts, for example. But you can be violent in words as well, by using harsh words, aggressive words, calling people names and so on. The tone also in which you speak. So be aware of that. The violence is not just purely physical or that killing people. It goes very deep and on very subtle levels. The last paragraph says that violence can be recognized through pain. Yeah. If I punch you on your eye, on your nose, you experience pain. We all know that that is pain. The difficulty with this is there are many forms of disruption in our self, physically and mentally, that we don't recognize as pain. We are just not fine-tuned enough in our senses to recognize that. But just restlessness is an expression of pain. And our mind is actually constantly reacting in a restless way. Restlessness is a result. If you would be totally in peace and totally non-violent, you would have very little mental activity, very low activity on the level of the mind. And as we know from our own experience, that is just not the case in most people. Of course, the question then arises, how far do you want to push this? Well, just as far as everybody individually would like to. That depends on how long you will be in yoga. But I assume that once you start practicing yoga, even if you stop practicing at a certain point in life because of career changes or get married or whatever, but the development will never stop. Once you open the lid, it will never stop. Your sensitivity will slowly but certainly be more and more fine-tuned. And maybe it's difficult to understand now, but having a violent thought, even if it is very minor, immediately causes a reaction in your energy circulation. Yeah? You understand that? If you don't understand that, then just look at what happens when you get really angry. When you get really angry, you explode. There's an explosion of energy in you. And if you are the least bit sensitive, you know that it takes a couple of days before you actually recover from that explosion. Have you noticed this in your life? If I lose my control, if somebody really pushes me over the edge and I get angry, I blow up, it takes me at least 4 days to be normal again, to be in peace again. You don't believe that, huh? Absolutely true. Pay attention next time when you have a big conflict and you explode in anger, emotion, just pay attention. Maybe it won't take 4 days, maybe it will take two days. But it really takes time to recover. So it's devastating. For that reason, this is important. But why am I telling you this? Because when you explode in anger, the effect is very obvious. While on a more subtle level, we don't really recognize the disruption, but it is there. On a subtle level, albeit, on a subtle level, and you will eventually become aware of that too. You will see. Okay, yeah.
I was just wondering, when we were talking about like the 3 levels of violence, what about people like artists or poets who try to like kind of vent their anger out in words? Is that like an inappropriate thing to do, or?
Creative.
Yeah.
In what way?
Well,
On stage?
my boyfriend's mom actually works in a prison. She works with very, very violent criminals, and one thing she does with them is she tries to get them to write poetry instead of, beating each other up.
Yep.
And try in an attempt to make them. She does other stuff with them too, where she tries to get them to meditate and be silent and those kinds of things.
Yep.
But another thing that really works for a lot of them is to kind of put their aggression into words and into poetry and into hip hop and into rap, as opposed to
Yep.
beating each other up.
Yeah. Okay, this is very interesting that you mentioned this. Why are they violent criminals? Because they are totally disharmonious because of circumstances they grew up in. They can't help that. They have not learned. They are not aware of that. So if you are not aware of it, you can't canalize all those negative energies. So what your friend's mom, what your boyfriend's mom is doing is basically taking control and trying to guide them into canalizing their energy. And in that way, your boyfriend's mom takes the sting out of their negative energy, brings them back to the basis, in fact, and as a result, they will start to become aware of themselves. And in most cases, of course, their behavior, there is a reason for that. They're not evil, they're not bad, most of the time, 99% of the time. It's just that their circumstances were not harmonious, and so they are very disharmonious, leading to bad behavior, so to speak. And you cannot tell them to sit down and observe and become harmonious, because they are messed up. They are too restless. Their energy cannot become harmonious, so you have to find outlets. One can be poetry, but that can be very difficult for many of them too. But expressing themselves in dance or hip-hop, singing, writing down what they feel and so on, that is instrumental in trying to bring them back and connect with themselves so that they become aware. And that can be, very often not, but that can be the basis for healing of their soul. And eventually they can become very valuable members of the community.
Or even like regular people, everybody has struggles and has had to overcome things. Like, what about people who aren't maybe that extreme, but doing things creatively that maybe be like kind of saying violent words in a song to kind of vent that out, or like in a poem or in anything?
No. As a sensible human being, you don't do that. As an ignorant human being, and I'm not using the word ignorant in the sense of we are using it as an abusive word, but ignorant simply means not knowing, not aware, lacking awareness. As an ignorant human being, you may need those kind of tools temporarily to bring a person to a certain state of being that is desirable. But as a sensible human being, you try to have, because you influence other people with that expression. You understand that? If you express your anger and you write a violent song, look what happens. There are many young people who listen to violent songs and they think that is a fashion, that is cool to behave in a violent way. I made a mention of this about MTV. Is that about in the subject of nonviolence, or the next one? MTV culture. In Holland, many young girls subject themselves to sexual abuse because that's cool. And if you don't do that, then you don't belong to the group. And if you are a little bit unstable mentally, it's very difficult to resist those forces. And that is the result of those kind of songs in which people express their anger and aggression. And the accompanying video clips. So, no, you have to look. If you choose something in your life to do something, you have to look at it from all corners. But maybe for you it could be constructive because it helps you to vent your anger, but what is the result? How does it affect other people? And if that is not good, not positive, you have to find yourself another constructive way to deal with your anger. That's your responsibility as a sensible human being. Those kind of people, if you talk about the ignorant people, they need somebody to guide them towards wisdom. The opposite of ignorance is wisdom. That's why those kind of people, like your boyfriend's mom, it's very important that there are those kind of people in prison system too, because there are many guards in prison system who don't give a damn. They would rather punch them on their nose rather than trying to understand them and help them and bring them to harmony. So your boyfriend's mom is functioning like a yogi almost, using her heart. We should all do that in our lives. Live from the heart. Do everything with passion. If you can't find passion in what you do, you're doing the wrong thing. That's a very bold statement. But, yeah, okay. We have to keep it here. We're very late. But we had to discuss Ahimsa, nonviolence, very important subject. Let's be back here by 2:20. There are many places around where you can have lunch. In the beginning you may